3 signals surfaced within weeks. Venezuela. Greenland. Iran. On the surface, they appear disconnected. Different hemispheres, different political climates, different headlines. Most people see them as isolated sparks in a chaotic world. But in the world of high-level geopolitics, there is no such thing as a coincidence. There are only patterns that haven't been recognized yet. Large systems rarely move without immense structural pressure. And right now, that pressure is building along very specific, very dangerous fault lines. By the time the mainstream media connects the dots, the map will have already changed. We are witnessing a quiet, cold repositioning of the global machine, a move toward leverage before leverage is used as a weapon. If you want to understand the next decade of conflict, you have to stop looking at the sparks and start looking at the fuel. The game has changed. The board has been tilted, and the players are already 3 moves ahead of the public consciousness. Most people read geopolitics through an emotional lens. We talk about expansion, provocation, or retaliation. We project human feelings onto the behavior of nation-states. This is the first illusion. State systems do not reposition because of emotion. They don't move because of ego or ideology. They move when exposure increases. Think of a global power like a biological organism. Its primary instinct is not glory, it is survival through the mitigation of risk. Specifically, exposure to 3 lethal variables: price shocks, transit vulnerability, and escalation miscalculation. When these 3 exposures rise simultaneously, the entire system enters a state of high alert. The strategy shifts. It doesn't happen loudly. There are no grand declarations or sudden invasions. Instead, it happens deliberately. It happens through the quiet movement of assets, the subtle renegotiation of sanctions, and the hardening of distant frontiers. We live in a world built on the illusion of just-in-time stability. We believe that oil will always flow, that ships will always arrive, and that borders will remain where we drew them in the 20th century. But that stability was a luxury of a unipolar world that no longer exists. Now the buffers are gone. The margins of error have evaporated. To survive the coming decade, the system must find new ways to absorb shock. And that journey begins in the most unlikely of places. Let's look at the first signal, Venezuela. To the casual observer, the sudden shift in diplomatic tone toward Caracas is a political flip-flop. But energy markets operate on expectation long before they operate on reality. Oil does not wait for a pipeline to explode to change its price. It reacts to the mere probability of disruption. In an unstable world, optionality is the only true form of power. For years, Venezuela represented dormant capacity, a massive reservoir of crude trapped behind a wall of sanctions and isolation. But as the traditional energy arteries of the Middle East and Eastern Europe began to fray, the system realized it was too rigid. A rigid system breaks under pressure. An elastic system survives. This is why Venezuela is being brought back into the fold. It's not about ideological alignment, it's about volatility management. Energy is the literal bloodstream of industrial civilization. When that bloodstream becomes unstable, every single organ downstream, from your local grocery store to the highest levels of military manufacturing, starts to fail. By integrating Venezuelan capacity, the global system increases its elasticity. It creates a backup lung. If tension spikes in the Persian Gulf, the system can now pull from the Caribbean. This diversification prevents a regional event from turning into a global pricing cascade. It lowers the systemic sensitivity to chaos. They aren't making friends with old enemies. They are installing shock absorbers into a machine that they know is about to be hit by a massive force. Now, shift your gaze north to the second signal, Greenland. The Arctic is currently undergoing the most significant physical transformation in human history. It is moving from an environmental margin, a frozen wasteland, to a primary strategic corridor. As seasonal navigability increases, the geography of the planet is being rewritten. These northern routes don't just shave off a few days of travel, they shorten the transit between Asia and Europe by thousands of kilometers. They bypass the traditional southern choke points of the Suez and Malacca. Shorter distance means lower fuel costs and faster delivery. But in the world of power, new routes mean new leverage. Trade routes rarely remain unmanaged. History teaches us that wherever wealth flows, influence must follow. Infrastructure determines access. Icebreaker fleets determine who is allowed to move. Monitoring systems determine who is being watched. Greenland occupies the high ground of this evolving geometry. It sits directly between the industrial heart of North America and the emerging Arctic basin. But its value isn't just in the water, it's in the air. Greenland hosts early warning radar infrastructure that is being integrated into a much broader, much faster defense system. We are entering an era where missile ranges are extending and reaction times are compressing into seconds. In this environment, early warning is the only currency that matters. It buys time, and time buys the ability to control the outcome. Geography does not stay neutral when its utility increases. Greenland is no longer an island. It is a permanent, stationary aircraft carrier at the center of the world's new trade map. The giants are positioning themselves, not for conquest, but for the inevitable moment when the Arctic becomes the world's most valuable real estate. Finally, we look at the third signal, Iran in the Middle East. While we look for new routes in the north, the old routes in the south are becoming more volatile than ever. The Strait of Hormuz remains the most concentrated energy artery on Earth. It is a biological choke point. If it closes, the modern world stops moving within 72 hours. This is where escalation management becomes a lethal art form. Escalation operates along a gradient. Small frictions, a seized tanker, a downed drone, can remain small, or they can expand into a total system collapse. The difference between the two is clarity. Visible presence signals thresholds. It draws a line in the sand that everyone can see. Thresholds reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty is the primary fuel for miscalculation. When energy transit corridors intersect with geopolitical tension, deterrence and signaling become intertwined. The goal is to prevent a mistake, because a miscalculation near a global choke point has consequences that no amount of Venezuelan oil or Arctic routes can fix. The system is screaming for stability, even if it has to maintain that stability at the edge of a knife. Now step back. Stop looking at the three regions and start looking at the single logic that connects them. Venezuela is about energy flexibility. It increases shock absorption. Greenland is about strategic depth. It secures the transit of the future. Iran is about escalation clarity. It manages the choke points of the present. Three regions, three tools, one singular objective: to reduce systemic fragility. Large systems, empires, trade blocs, global markets prioritize stability over surprise every single time. Surprise in energy pricing destabilizes domestic politics. Surprise in transit corridors reshapes the wealth of nations. Surprise in escalation compresses the time for diplomacy until war is the only option left. The world order is currently in a state of high fragility. The old guards are weakened. The new competitors are hungry. When fragility rises, repositioning follows. It happens quietly, behind the scenes, in the fine print of trade deals and the placement of radar stations. The move has already been made. The system is moving toward leverage before that same leverage can be used against it. It is a race to secure the walls before the storm arrives. If you read these headlines emotionally, they look like a world falling apart. But if you read them structurally, they reveal a world being meticulously coordinated around its constraints. Energy volatility, transit leverage, escalation control. These are not ideological categories. They are the structural variables of the 21st century. The question you should be asking yourself is not which headline will come next, or which leader will say something provocative on camera. The real question is, where does the exposure remain unbuffered? Where is the system still thin? Where is the next gap that needs to be closed? Because systems move toward leverage long before they announce it, and by the time the announcement reaches your screen, the game is already over. Watch the signals. The silence is where the real history is being written. Watch the shift.